guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. It's an early morning video, so I hope you're doing well this morning. You're probably not watching it this morning, but I'm recording it this morning, so I have my coffee. And I'm going to cheers you. This is my new thing. I come into the office before anyone's here and I make videos. Sorry if my voice is a little scratchy. I'm like just getting over a bit of a cold, but I'm really excited because we are talking about The Inspector Wears Skirts, which apparently is a little bit of a controversial film. I'm always like the last person to learn that movies are unliked in the fan community, or that there are certain contingents of fans who do not like them. I kind of get it with this movie. I guess this is the 88 films release. I will be reviewing this Blu-ray and I will be talking about the film. I had never seen this movie before. I am so happy that I saw it. I loved it. I actually just moved it into my top 4 on Letterboxd, which is, my Letterboxd is really kind of mostly for Hong Kong stuff. So even though I log everything I watch, I try to keep my top 4 Hong Kong because it's kind of tied to this channel. The cast in this movie is incredible. This movie came out in 1988, ran in theaters from June 3rd of 1988 to June 16th of 1988. I would urge you to check out Frank Chang's commentary on here because he talks about how this movie was like a really big hit, kind of like an unexpectedly big hit at the time that it came out, because it didn't have any like really huge stars in it. It had popular actors in it. Like obviously you see Cynthia Rothrock, you see Sybil Hu, but it didn't have like marquee stars like Jackie Chan or Sammo Hung or Chow Yun-fat or anyone like that, right? In 1988 is a really stacked year for Hong Kong cinema, so it came out in a year with a lot of competition, did really well. So check out Frank's commentary because he talks a lot about that. It was directed by Welson Chin Seng Wai, and then Cheng Cam Fu and Abe Kwong Man Lai were the writers of the film. The cast, like I said, is incredible. Sybil Hu, Kara Hui right here, who is absolutely incredible and amazing. You see Cynthia Rothrock right there. Billy Lau is in this movie, who's in the Mr. Vampire movies, who I think is absolutely hysterical. Bill Tung, Uncle Bill, is in this movie. Hell yeah. He's basically just like a cameo, but he's in it. Michael Chow, Alex To, Stanley Fung from the Lucky Stars films is in here. Mars, you will definitely recognize. And then the main cast, like the women who lead the film, are, like I said, Sybil Hu, Cynthia Rothrock, Kara Hui, Sandra Anne Bridgewater, Regina Kent, Ellen Chan, Lee Poi Ling. The cast is really incredible in this movie, and the thing that really holds this movie together, that really elevates it, that really drives it, and that made me really genuinely I really loved this movie, is the cast, their dynamics, their relationships, the way they bring such individual personalities to their roles. Really quick plot synopsis. Sybil Hu is a cop. Cynthia Rothrock is an Interpol agent. And Cynthia Rothrock is like in the beginning, and then she comes back kind of towards the third act of the film. What would traditionally be like the third act like she comes back about an hour into the film, and she's in like the final half hour as like a prominent character. But like the middle, or kind of, yeah, like the kind of like after the opening action sequence, which is a fantastic action sequence, she kind of disappears for like an hour or so, maybe like 45 minutes. Sybil Hu is a cop who is asked to put together a squad of all-female officers. So this is a training film. And the movie that it most reminded me of, now a lot of people on this release compare it to Police Academy, because that is a film about cops training. That is a goofy film. There is some like very goofy humor in this movie, and there are some slapstick elements. But the movie that this most reminded me of was Top Gun, because Top Gun is a movie about these people who are in this very rigorous training program, who have really high stakes on their job and in their training program. And it's about their personal lives, their personal relationships, their group dynamics, and how those things evolve and change over the course of the training program, how that changes them as people. And I think that this is a very similar film in many ways. This film, like I said, does have like classic 80s. It has slapstick. It also has screwball, I think. I would say that there's a fair amount of screwball humor in here in addition to the slapstick. I'm a huge fan of screwball humor. I'm also a huge fan of like character-driven dramedy type of films. Like I love the Lethal Weapon movies. And when I really think about it, yes, they have great action. You know, Jet Li is in one of them. There's incredible fight scenes in that and stuff like that. Car chases, shootouts, and everything. The glue of those films is Riggs and Murtaugh, their relationships, the Murtaugh family dynamics, the way that Riggs kind of figures into that, and their relationships with everybody else. Like the Joe Pesci comes in the third one, Chris Rock comes in the fourth one, right? But like their captain is in all the movies, and they're constantly like at odds with him. Like he likes them, but he's always annoyed with them. And like the core character relationships, Rene Russo, who comes in the third one, in those films, to me are the glue that holds those films together. And this movie is very similar. Like it has some really fantastic fights and action sequences, but it really is a character and like cast dynamic driven film. So let me show you the physical release here. This is a really nice slipcase here, artwork by Sean Longmore, and I really like this artwork. and it's a nicely manufactured slipcase. So then you have that artwork here, and then if you want to reverse it, you do have, well, here's the disc, so you can see how the disc sits in the case, and then I just don't want to, yeah, there we go. So there's that there. There is an essay in here. I will talk about the essay in just a second, but let me show you it also comes with a poster. So that's the Sean Longmore artwork, and then the reversible art is what is also the reversible art on the disc. So here you have the whole cast. And Anne Bridgewater, who is in this movie, is in Full Contact. So you'll definitely recognize her from that if you are a Ringo Lam or Chow Yun-fat fan. So the essay in here, and this is the booklet here, Top Squad, alternate title there, Cynthia Rothrock, and here's it's Sandra. She plays like the Frank Chang in his commentary calls her the Stephen Chow character in this movie, and she very much is that type of like over the top, hilarious comedic relief. They're constantly making jokes about how she's like fat and ugly, and I'm like, if she's fat and ugly, I'm just a walrus. Like, are you kidding me? Oh, that's right. So it's called Girls with Skirts, a look at Inspectors Wear Skirts' role in the Girls with Guns genre by Paul Bramwell. So what Paul does in this essay is he contextualizes this film in like the kind of continuum in the history of the Girls with Guns subgenre. He talks about Michelle Yeoh. He talks about Jackie Chan as a producer on this film. He compares this film to other films that were contemporary to it, and then how kind of the Girls with Guns subgenre grew out of these films, like into the 90s, like how it evolved, but then also how this series, because I think there's at least 4 of these films, because 88 Films, I believe, is releasing the rest of them, how this series evolved and how that kind of related to other things that were going on in Hong Kong cinema at the time, and the Girls with Guns subgenre, and action films more generally speaking, and that kind of stuff. So it's a very interesting historical context essay there. There's Mars, as you can see, and there's Billy Lau. So that's the essay, that's the physical release, that's a basic overview of the film. Let me talk to you about my thoughts on the film, which I already sort of gave you in miniature earlier in the review. Let me just have another sip of coffee here. I'm a little bit tired. Cheers. So like I said, Top Gun. If you're looking for like a straight up Girls with Guns, gung-ho, like those down and dirty, scuzzy, nasty Moon Lee type of movies, or even like, I think Sybil Hu was in Devil Hunters, right? She's in this, and I think that came out just a year after this. That movie's freaking incredible. I hope somebody puts that on Blu-ray. Alex Mann is in that movie. It's just fantastic. Those are like really down and dirty, violent, nonstop action, fighting, shooting, kind of scuzzy grindhouse movies. This is very much not that kind of movie. This is a more like Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung style, crowd-pleasing dramedy. I know dramedy was not really like a heavily used word in the 80s, and this is not a dramedy in the way that you would think of like an Alexander Payne film as a dramedy, or like one of those other kind of more prestige type of filmmakers who makes what are essentially dramas that are sprinkled with comedic elements. This is a movie that really balances comedy and drama. And the comedy can be very goofy. So if you're not into that kind of stuff, this was actually an interesting thing that Frank Chang talks about in the commentary is this film was inspired by the success of the Lucky Stars series. So they wanted another action comedy series, and the Girls with Guns genre was becoming a thing at the time. So like, why don't we, stitch those two things together and see what we can do with it? And so if you think of like Sammo movies like Winners and Sinners, Carry On Pickpocket, which is a movie I freaking absolutely loved, and I really hope someone puts that on Blu-ray. We're back. I had a quick work phone call that I had to deal with, so I had to interrupt the video. I'm sorry. Like I said, I'm coming in early to the office to record these, but I do have to do work in the event that it arises. I'm rearranging my tripod here. So we were talking about comedy in this movie, right? Sammo Hung type of films, that type of comedy. One of the things that I think is really excellent about this film is that the comedy routines are not there solely for the sake of being silly comedy. They kind of drive the movie. They drive the characters. They drive the evolution of the story. They drive the character dynamics, which is really the evolution of the character dynamics and the way in which the characters change individually and as a group is really the heart of this film. So to give you one solid example of this, and I'm going to try not to spoil too much here, but there's a scene in this film where all the women in this training program, go out with, so they're training at this base, and there's a group of men who are training at the base too, led by Stanley Funk. So that's the character that he plays. And they make arrangements to go roller skating together as like an outing. It's so 80s. It is so 80s. The roller skating sequence is incredible. Like if you were, I was 5 when this movie came out, right? So like I have very early childhood memories of like this era in the 80s, the fashion, the music, like it's so 80s. Like at one point I wrote down to myself, this is almost like a John Hughes movie, but instead of being high school students, they're like these badass cops, right? It has this like strong kind of 80s kind of, like young people, turmoil, anxiety, romance, comedy type of thing to it. But so they go roller skating, and there ends up being, at the beginning of the roller skating thing, there's this bit where these two women are kind of like, they think that they both think the same guy is interested in them, right? Should also be pointed out that there is a very dated element to the gender roles and like the sexual politics in this film, but at the same time, it's actually really interesting, three-dimensional, because you have these women who are total badasses, who are doing all this training, firing these guns, like fist fighting with each other, fist fighting with criminals, like doing martial arts. And then they put on their, their like dresses and stuff, and they go out dancing, and it shows like a very three-dimensional portrayal of what it can mean to be a woman. But then at the same time, there are elements of it that are very dated and very 1980s and very like Hong Kong. So it's an interesting kind of study of that kind of stuff. But so they all go out, and there's two women who think the same guy is interested in both of them. And it kind of creates like a little bit of tension between them. There's a little bit of a spat, and you start to see these kind of fissures forming in the group dynamics and their closeness. But then something happens that causes the women to have to come back together to reconcile whatever differences they may have had, to forget about those problems and to work together as a team. And it's built around a comedy like sequence and like a really goofy, silly screwball style escalation into this like slapstick roller skating. It's almost like a brawl basically, right? But within that is the evolution of character dynamics, the evolution of the dynamics of the group, and the evolution of them as people coming to better understand themselves and one another. And that's the heart of this film. And that is so well done consistently throughout this movie that there's, there are Hong Kong films where you have this similar kind of structure where you have action sequence at the beginning, action sequence at the end, and in the middle there's drama and comedy and character stuff. This is a very common structure that Sammo Hung uses like a ton, like all the Lucky Stars films, Carry On Pickpocket. As I said, the Pom Pom movies, he didn't direct, but he produced those. He was one of the writers on those films, and like there's a very common structure in those films. And I think Wheels on Meals is kind of similar, right? So you have that huge fight at the end, but a lot of it is character comedy and character dynamics and stuff like that. And some of those films are very episodic, and it's just goofiness for the sake of being goofy, and it's just like kind of riffing on different comedic ideas. This film really builds sequence to sequence and uses both its comedy and its action to have a really satisfying arc where, you meet these women at the beginning, and then you see what they're capable of at the end, and you see how far they've come and all the things they've gone through. And I mean, look, I'm a bit of a sentimentalist, and I'm very much a romantic. And there are scenes in this movie that I found to be like really powerful. Like they're corny and they're obvious and stuff like that, but in a very kind of primal, fundamental, like, caveman brain satisfying way. There's a one scene where one of the characters thinks that she's better than everyone else. And in a way she is, but she's not more important than the group. And so the Sybil Who character kind of has to teach her this lesson. And it's done in a way that's not goofy, that's not condescending, that's not nasty. That's just a very serious look at how you really teach people in situations like that they are a team and that they have to work together. Otherwise it doesn't work. No matter how good they are individually, it doesn't, like, the team is what needs to work, not the individual skill sets. And I thought that was like a really good scene. Like if you like sports movies and stuff like that, where like you always have the scene of like the coach who's like, you may be the best player, but it's a cliche type of scene, but when it's well done, it can be really effective because it's something that a lot of people have experienced. It's a universal truth of these types of things, right? And I just thought that was a really well handled scene. And there's just a lot of really well done filmmaking in this movie in terms of the writing, the directing, the acting, the choices that are made. There's also, worth pointing out, there's some really good cinematography in this film. And the cinematographers are Andrew Lau, who I have talked about a lot on this channel if you watch my reviews regularly. Andrew Lau directed the Young and Dangerous films. He directed Infernal Affairs, but he is also an incredible cinematographer. He shot City on Fire. He shot As Tears Go By, the Wong Kar-wai film. He shot the first half of Chungking Express, and then Christopher Doyle shot the second half of it. So the part with Takeshi Kaneshiro that was shot by Andrew Lau. So he's an incredible cinematographer, and he shot a lot of movies I've talked about on this channel. And then the other cinematographer is Kung, sorry, my handwriting is terrible, who shot Armor of God and Eastern Condors, among other things. So like highest level cinematographers, obviously, and there's some really cool camera work in this film if you're into that type of thing. And Frank talks about that on his commentary track too. The one other thing I wanted to mention before there's two things I want to mention. The Project A2 set is used in this movie, and I was watching the movie, and there's a scene where I'm like, that is the freaking restaurant for Project A2 where they're fighting the axe gang and they're throwing the axes and Jackie is handcuffed to the other guy. That set is in this movie, and there's other parts of the Project A2 set. There's like the opening action scene takes place on a movie set, and I won't spoil the context of it for you, but it's the set for Project A2. And I'm a huge Jackie Chan fan, but that's also when I did my top 15 Jackie movies recently, that was in my top 3. So I love that movie, and it was just so cool to see that. I geeked out about it. Another note here that I wrote that's worth mentioning is that there's really great individualized characters in this movie. You have a large group, and all of the characters stand out in their own way. They have very unique personalities, and the women who play them really, really well. So you really understand who they are and what they bring to the group dynamics. And I think you often, in like lesser group films, you have 1 or 2 or 3 individualized personalities, and you have a bunch of anonymous people. And in this movie, we can just count on the front cover here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's also her. That's also her. The other woman who's not on here, 6. I can't remember the name of the actor who played her. There's at least like 7, I would say, very clearly individualized, delineated. Oh, the Anne Bridgewater character is not on here. Is she? She's not one of the big characters. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's at least 7 very clearly delineated, individualized characters in this group, and they're really well done. And I really appreciated that as a writer. I know that's just very hard to do. There's also just a really funny scene in this movie that I need to mention very quickly, and then I'll talk about the bonus material. There's this thing at the end with these jewelry thieves. I'm not going to spoil anything that happens, but there's just this one little instance that's so funny that also I think is like encapsulates a lot of what's good about this movie. One of the women kicks the absolute shit out of this jewel thief. Like, it's a really hard, like, I think there's like wires involved, like people go flying or whatever. And he slams against this wall and falls down, and he knocks like some valuable thing off the wall. And he's like, oh, and he puts it in his pocket. It's like they never miss a chance to have like goofy comedy in this movie, even during the action scenes. But I love that kind of stuff. I do. Okay, so bonus material. There's the Frank commentary track, which I talked about quite a bit already. He talks about like what is the original language title of the film, the Chinese language title, what was the box office, why it was such a big hit, how that was such an interesting thing, the sequels they spun out of it. There are amazing bios. There are a lot of people in this movie who I've seen in other films, but I don't really know anything about. And then there's one actually that Alex Toe is like one of the main characters in this film. Kicking my tripod is one of the main characters in this film. I don't know anything about him, and Frank has like a really fascinating, extensive bio of him. He talks about Jackie and how he was involved as the producer in this film. Actually, one thing that was really interesting is he talks about the way that the Hong Kong police say "sir" and "madam," and how they don't do that anymore, and when they stopped doing that, and why they stopped doing that, and kind of some other interesting stuff about the history of the police in Hong Kong that I knew nothing about. So it's a great commentary track. I highly recommend it. 17-minute long interview with Cynthia Rothrock. It's like 16:45-ish, which is awesome. She talks about how she got involved in the film. She was shooting another movie concurrently with this one. She had no idea what the plot was. Like, there was no script. She only knew who her character was and what she was supposed to be doing in every scene. Like, she had no idea what the movie was. She just showed up when they wanted her to show up and did what they told her to do. She said Sybil Hu spoke English really well, and so Cynthia Rothrock became like good friends with her, and they had a really good relationship. She talks about how impressed she was with the women in the movie, because not all of the women who are in, I would say with the exception of Kara Hui, they're not really like people known for fighting or martial artists. And so Cynthia says she was really impressed with how they threw themselves at like the stunts and the physicality of the role, and like they weren't afraid of it, and they like really went for it. She thought that was really amazing. And also, so another thing she talks about is this is a different choreography team. She previously worked primarily with the Korean choreography team, and Corey Yoon was like, be careful, you're going to a different choreography team, they're going to expect different things from you, and they're not friends with you, and that's not to be an insult to them, but we're, Corey Yun is like, I know you. We've worked with you before. You're our friend. We look out for you. We know what we are and aren't capable of, and like how to protect you. And like they might not know those things, so you got to advocate for yourself. You got to be careful. Try not to get hurt. Like it was very interesting to hear that aspect of it. And then there's a 16-minute long interview with the director, which is really cool. He's Sammo Hung's cousin. I wish I were Sammo Hung's cousin. Which is cool. Good for him. I mean, he's obviously a very talented filmmaker, so he didn't make it just because he was Sammo Hung's cousin. But that's how he got into the industry, was being Sammo's cousin. And then he moved over to Jackie's stunt team with Sammo's blessing, of course. And then Jackie asked him to direct a film, which was Naughty Boys, which is I have a digital copy of. I haven't watched it. I really want to see that movie. People tell me I'll love it. It's like very goofy and funny. But that movie was like like it did decent money at the box office, and so he was asked to do another film, and which was this film. And actually, interestingly, he talks about, they asked him if he had control over the casting, and he's like, no, because my first movie was not enough of a hit. So like if they had gone to people and been like, oh, he directed this film, they'd be like, so it was like people above him on the food chain, maybe like Jackie, I don't know, maybe Raymond Chow, whoever was involved in this film, they were the ones like doing the casting, going out, making the offers and stuff like that, because he wasn't enough of a name at that point yet in his career to really attract like the highest level cast, which I thought was really interesting. And he talks about the ideation process on this film, like how they came up with the idea, how they developed the idea. And he talks about Cynthia Rothrock and how they wanted to bring her in to expand the film, to make it more international, to have it be bigger than just like a Hong Kong thing, but have this Interpol agent and this white woman who is there, and then maybe to attract international audiences as well. So it's a really good release. Like I said, 33 minutes worth of interviews with one of the stars and the director. You have a great commentary from Frank Jeng. There's a really interesting essay on here, but I just really enjoyed this movie. It's like right in my wheelhouse. It's like an 80s Hong Kong movie with gun action, with martial arts action, and with lots of very good character drama and comedy. Like, I mean, among my favorite films ever and favorite Hong Kong films, you'll find Winners and Sinners and Wheels on Meals and like the Project A film. So this is like exactly the type of movie I love, and I was extremely happy with this one. I really enjoyed the crap out of it. So my name is Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society, and this is an A and B region release. I say this at the very end of the video, but just in case you were wondering, there you go. We'll see you next time.